Hi there. When I was at school, I was a voracious reader and I was a member of a couple of libraries, one near to the school and the other in the city centre. Then a mobile library started coming to the shops near to where I live, and every Thursday, and I used to go and browse the books there and pick up something to read. And one day, my attention was caught by a book on judo, and it's a book. It's a subject I'd never really taken an interest in before, but I picked it up and I read it, and it's this book, Every Boy's Judo by Alan Harrington. And this book literally changed my life. Everything that I did in my life since reading this book came from this book. I read this one. Next time I went to the library, there was a couple of other judo books. I got them out. I got interested in judo. I located a dojo, which was actually just up the road from my school. I wasn't even aware of it, just a dull brass plaque. I passed one day and I started going there, started taking up judo. That led me into interest in all the martial arts. Eventually, I really tried to find a karate dojo. Very difficult to find. I won't go into all how I finally got to take up karate at the Red Triangle, and that eventually got me into security, into close protection, bodyguarding, into the training of it, into the firearms, into working with police overseas, literally everything. Almost everyone I'm associated with, everyone I know, all my friends, all come directly from my picking up this book and reading it. So it's interesting if you can pinpoint a turning point in your life. And my life would certainly have been very, very different had I not read that book. So this video is the second in the series on necklocks, and the relevance of the book on judo is that the necklocks that we're talking about came from judo. And I mentioned in the first video that we did on the subject, the introduction, that there are various types. There's chokes, there are spine locks and so on, and I mentioned that strangle. So the strangle is very, very well taught in judo, and even when I took up judo, I was in a juniors class, and even then we were taught the strangle. And the books at that time really went into the anatomy and physiology of the strangle in detail, and emphasized the action of the strangle slides the sternomastoid muscles back, exposing the carotid arteries, which are then compressed by the arms in a vice-like action. And those early judo books, I was fascinated with this, how much detail they'd gone into. One of the exercises we used to do, and this is again a junior class, was you and your partner would stand back to back. I would take my belt, loop it over his neck, his throat, the front of his throat, and pull him onto my back like a sack of coal. And then you had to cross the length of the dojo, and then you would change roles. And this was to accustom you to the pressure so you could fight it, and B, strengthen the neck. Now obviously in these days of health and safety, people would be absolutely horrified by that, and I don't recommend anyone doing it. I don't know if they still do it, I'm pretty sure they don't. Judo has several different strangles, but the one that's mostly taught, mostly referred to, is Hadaka-shime, which usually is translated as rear naked. Colloquially, it's called rear naked choke. That's incorrect. As we talked about, a choke is an air compression. This is a strangle, so it should be RNS, rear naked strangle. And Hadaka, which means naked, refers to the fact that you're not using clothing to assist in the compression, because some of the or most of the other judo necklocks and strangles utilize either the collar or some other part of the gi, which is very heavyweight in judo, to assist in that. The advantage of the RNS is that it works no matter what clothing he's got or none. So it's the one really for all occasions. Now, if you've trained in judo and you know all, the sliding lapel strangle and so on, then if you can apply them, that's fine. But the standby one, the one that you should know in the armory, is Hadaka-shime. Okay, so I've made a video or a couple of videos to show you on the actual application. So this is the kind of overview of the technique. Okay, you snake your arm low under the chin. Make sure you don't come here in his eye line. Okay, gives him a chance to react. You follow this line here. Make sure your elbow is in the center and both arms one each side of the neck. You then clasp your hands together and at the same time pull back, breaking his balance and also exposing the arteries, the blood vessels, by sliding the muscle. And then you've got his balance, and when he goes unconscious, you just take him to the ground. Okay, I will emphasize that it's very, very important to break his balance. This really takes away his ability to defeat the technique, because he's constantly trying to regain his balance. So you can take his balance backwards, keep moving backwards, or move in a tight circle. It shouldn't take very long, but you take his balance. There are techniques that were taught, particularly in the military, where you do, as you put the strangle on, you do a flat kick to the back of the knee and take him as well. Okay, we will now go into detail and discuss a few of the technical points on the strangle. Points, as you're encircling here, make sure you go low under the jaw. Now, if he chins down, there's things we can do. We can solve that problem, or we can face bar him. There's things to do. But ideally, before he realizes you're there, you've done this. Do the figure four, we've got his balance, and we're doing the nutcracker effect on either side of his neck. Now, I emphasize the elbow in the center here. This makes a pocket to protect the larynx here, so you don't crush the larynx. Okay? It's a very safe technique if you do it properly. So the arms either side of the neck act as a sort of nutcracker or a nunchaku, with a vice-like effect, compressing. But at the same time, as I mentioned, there's a void in the elbow socket here which protects, so you don't compromise the larynx. And hence the strangle is a very safe technique for this. Then also in the video you will have noticed we have ways to avoid him chinning down. If he chins down, there are ways of exposing. And one that I demonstrated there was the face bar. And the face bar, it can be a standalone technique. You can just use a face bar, or it can be to allow you to apply the strangle. It was really taught to me by Tommy Mack, my good friend who used to work with Terry on the Cavern, and he was a wrestler. And one of the subtleties of it is that you use this part here of the hand, the kind of wishbone, and it's up under the this part of the bone of the face and across the nose. And as Tommy says, if you apply the face bar, he'll be howling and begging you just to strangle him. So it's a really good technique. We will now go into what happens when the strangle works and he goes asleep. Okay, so the neck lock's on. As Sai loses consciousness, Mark goes down, follows him down, turns him into the recovery position. He controls it, right? Okay, so if you want to take him down, where it's your decision to take him down, take a deep step back, and the knee nearest to him is the one you kneel on. But as shown in the video, if he suddenly goes unconscious, you've suddenly got a dead weight, 16 stone, 18 stone, whatever, on that arm. So you anticipate it happening and follow him down, maintaining your balance as shown in the video. The last thing you want to do is to dump him on his head. I've seen it happen. I've seen a colleague take an unconscious guy off me. I put him to sleep, and he fumbled, and the guy split his head open. Fortunately, we applied first aid and all was well. But we don't want that. We're using a safe, non-injurious technique for a reason. So don't spoil it all by dumping him on something hard. Okay. I mainly use the figure 4. But there is the hand clasp variation as well. And when you do the hand clasp, it's the gable grip, the wrestler's gable grip. You don't interlock your fingers. It's a gable grip. It's very, very strong. And at first I used to use the hand clasp all the time. And one of the things is get head to head with him so he can't headbutt you. And it also acts as a kind of cervical collar. But then I found later, particularly when we started wearing bomber jackets, which are thick, heavily padded jackets, it dissipates some of the nutcracker effect on the sides of his neck. There's a cushioning effect. So the figure 4, with that pressure on the back of his neck into the vice, into the nutcracker, really applies extra force of the strangle, and it made it more effective. The other thing it did was it keeps your head away from his, and you can scan better. So in crowd situations, particularly if you're looking for successive threats, and also looking for a way and a clear passage out, etc. It's a better one. The lateral vascular neck restraint is a law enforcement application of the rear naked strangle. And it's somewhat controversial these days, but it has a real proven track record. We taught it in South Africa to the police there, and it was widely taught in the United States. For example, in Kansas City, Missouri, was having between 25 and 50 applications a day. It's quite a large metropolitan area, but that gives you some example. And they had many thousands. In the 1990s, they'd had 260,000 applications without really any significant problems. Most of the problems come from if you drop the guy. Secondly, if he's full of all sorts of weird chemicals and things that are going to affect his heart rate and his brain activity adversely. And then lastly, and this was the reason LAPD got rid of the strangle. They had a couple of fatalities, but it wasn't the strangle. The guy had gone unconscious, but it's after he's been transported, usually face down. And you get a lot of overweight people, and there's diaphragm restriction and so on. But generally speaking, it's a tremendously safe technique. The Kodokan in 1963 issued a study in which unconsciousness was produced in 8 to 14 seconds. And after release of the hold, the subjects regained consciousness in 10 to 20 seconds. That is kind of ballpark from what I've seen. The fastest I think I ever applied it was in one of the clubs. The guys were bringing a couple of guys out who'd been fighting and they were struggling. And I grabbed one, and the other doorman who'd run with me ran past me and looked at his face and said he's out. So it was it was on, bang, he was out. And now that's unusual. It's not usually that quick. But 6 to 8 seconds, very possible. Tommy, who I mentioned before, was always skeptical about the effects of necklocks. And it was always... Now, Tommy, as a younger guy, was brimming in confidence. He would fight anyone. And it was his contention that if anyone ever tried to put anything around his neck, he'd just go for the eyes, just take their eyes. And our old friend Arthur Tansley, who was a judo fourth dan from Kodokan, trained in Japan, he was over, and he was talking about techniques with Terry and Tommy. I wasn't there, but I had it both first hand from Terry and Tommy. And it came to sort of that discussion. Tommy had said, well, I'll take your eyes out. And Arthur went, no, you wouldn't. So it was kind of a test. And the agreement was that Arthur would start. They didn't use the rear naked, they used the collar one. He'd start with his hands like this, and Tommy would have his hands on top of Arthur's hands. And as soon as Arthur started it, he would go for the eyes and just touch the eyes. All friendly, but, very interesting test. And in Tommy's own words, he said, I had my hands there. He said, I felt a tightness on my neck, and I thought, right, this is the time. He said, I don't remember anything else. And he did it again, and he was ready for it, and again he didn't even get his hands up. He'd gone, his knees had buckled. So that is an expert application by a trained judoka, and but it's a simple technique to learn, and we can all learn it. One of the really good things about it is, with the disparity of force, Vince O'Neill, Oklahoma State law enforcement trainer, great guy, he told me a story. He was out on a rural road, and officers working that kind of thing, very, very far from backup, and he stopped this guy, and the guy was a gorilla in his words, and Vince got the strangle on from behind and basically just rode him. The guy was bucking like a bronco, but eventually he went to sleep, and then he was able to be handcuffed and so on. Probably the alternative at the time, the alternative to that would have been shooting him, because we didn't have tasers back then. Even a baton, satin baton and so on, probably wouldn't have really done the job, and it certainly would have produced a lot more injury. Okay, so that's it for the second part. The next part, which will probably be next month, we will discuss the way that you can actually apply this in the street in reality, and it turns it from an intervention technique into a real effective technique for preemptives. And I'll also introduce you or tell you about the chap who was responsible for literally hundreds of people in Liverpool being strangled unconscious. So catch you then.